Yeah, I've been thinking about maybe getting a 28,000 watt Westinghouse V-twin generator, but it seems to be, a bunch of projected estimates seemingly as retroactive presidential administration like going on in my life. I wear my whole life of it. Yeah. So I'm kind of like thinking about, Texas and Mexico powers compared to a V-twin, generator. I'm looking at a 28,000 watt V-twin, but, I'm looking at Texas and Mexico power too, and it seemed to be the issue. I mean, going back, 6-7 years, this really been going on, about, someone just like decided that they wanted to, switch my big ass propane tank with a bunch of defective, calibrated issues and getting built in a tank from Mexico. I'm in Pearland, Texas, okay, and Bakehouse out of League City, Texas is predominantly, an account that my father set up before he passed away. Well, anyway, that had been going on, and I really got irritated about the billing and what Access has obviously meant to, like someone just decided that they wanted to go in my yard and like switch a big ass tank and, presented it as like some idea of, carbon footprint and absentee voting as a big ass tank being built and not really recognizing potentially any connectivity to the Centerpoint Energy being likewise like trading energy, or some North American Free Trade Act and, some idea, like a North Atlantic Peace Treaties organization and the peace sign, and ultimately even a big twin, even Texas and Mexico power and some combine of the Roosevelt New Deal Act in my mind of the International Electronic Engineering and OPEC. And it seemed to be almost like the requirement of Region 1, not a question of like I-10 or binary numbers or Region 0 being used. It's like intellectual of a carbon footprint of a vice president network presenting, the issue, whether if international citizenship is up for grabs or, some idea of like, some haloed transponder like Centerpoint Energy identifying like a latitude. It's like some, haloed angel in orbit like a stationary engineer. And it seemed to be presenting, the deal about, now it seemed to be Texas and Mexico power and like the Centerpoint Energy smart meter being used as a transponder, and it's almost like the thing that seemed to be the idea of like applying like the algebraic Kirchhoff inversion of the equal sign with a line through it, the does or does not equal to see if the results that the answer equals the results, and that's really what the algebraic Kirchhoff inversion is that equal sign with or without a line. It's just a formative computation to identify whatever it needs to mean, and obviously means of does or does not equal the algebraic Kirchhoff inversion. Yet that applies to linguistic alphanumerics. Is kind of like the thing about it. The thing with it is that now it seems to be that does or does not equal sign is it's almost like the experience of like the American Heart and Lung Association and some idea beyond the thought of like North Atlantic Peace Treaties organization as some idea of like a V-twin. I mean, like right now it seems to be the thing about the North American Free Trade Act and the carbon footprint and some idea of the North Atlantic Peace Treaties, the organization idealistically presenting the idea of like the combine of like what would be maybe Texas and New Mexico, not a question of like Region 1 being Region 1 that includes like Canada. As far as like alphanumerics goes, like Texas is 69, the same as like Mexico. But Mexico is not Region 1, it's actually Region 0, like I-10 and binary numbers, and all this is going on, and like again, it's kind of like the Centerpoint Smart and the Centerpoint Energy Smart Meter has become like likewise in addition the Euro dollar, and it's not Region 1. Okay, what it really is that cycle of frequency with a center line of oscillation at a 90 degree, with a circle with a dot in it, like, the accuracy of like reason zero, like everything like known to mankind on the face of the earth, of like normally some idea of like non-degree, non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, and some idea of like, having very use of like only what intellectual property only means, as some idea of like, what that means in real estate. Normally some idea that, the idea of like monopolizing capitalization, and some idea of like, foster granting, the idea of using methods of like family law as adoption to actually create some idea of transfer of like, the idea of what intellectual property normally identifies, and not really, the idea of like, family law using the thought of like foster granting, adoption, in a way of like, having control in a way that's kind of like, naive to like monopolizing capitalization as compared to intellectual property, the same practical application of principle of having fair use. The thing about family law is like having the presence. You've heard it, in many ways, a practical application, like even the biblical scripture having the form of godness, but denying the power thereof, or the idea of like monopolizing capitalization is some idea of Ulysses S. Grant combining the student loan with a Pell Grant, or some idea, that foster granting, by means of like adoption. And the thing with this is that, foster granting by adoption, using family law, or some idea of monopolizing capitalization in the form of not necessarily a forfeiture or neglect based on lack of experience. But the thing with this is that really ultimately, if it's getting to a carbon footprint and absentee voting, what that obviously means in the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and what a footprint is or is not, as a projected estimate, whether it's biometrics of a projected estimate, or some idea of like litigation de facto res habeas corpus using an intellectual easement, like de facto being like an entire lifespan of a specific, idea of like, a name, or even alphanumerics representing, like in my case, alphanumerics is 213 in telepathic brainwaves, yet the spirit of adoption geographically is like Brazoria country, and like a telepathic mediation sky, have some idea of like some telepathic communication, or think about really the spirit of adoption in a way that's symbolic between the C and the PTI, so both sides of the US $1 bill. Yet in family law, adoption used, ultimately it gets to the paper made 5610 and 94 and annotated adoption and abortion in a Roe v. Wade thing. Even, the thing about foster granting, foster granting, of methods, having fair use of methods of like family law as adoption, yet intellectual of having fair use, but not claiming ownership of the rights. All that is so like degreed. Practical application of principle, different terminology, really ultimately is not supposed to mean the same, but in practical application and principle, it's really exactly that. But where the word is obviously where the word is. Knowing where the word is in a different use, just based on it meaning the same and not realizing that the terminology is different, and like consciously doesn't like bring a conscious awareness of maybe the potential of like what's really going on, Well, anyway, so I was kind of like thinking about that, because it seemed to be that ultimately, the idea of like monetary and domestic of neighborhoods, the thing of it is that really, that ultimately it seemed to be getting beyond the idea of suppression and loss prevention as settlement, or depreciation in real estate, or the idea of like whether city prosecution is the only idea of the Olympics, or what the torch is. The torch? You kidding me? The Olympic torch? In any case, so like what I was thinking about really is that really, I mean, sometimes I wonder, really about the torch being some idea of, being led to believe in constitutional law that the phrase personal injury is not, like self-destructive based upon the Consumer Report. I mean, that is a phrase used phenomenally on television as legal terminology of an attorney, not really a client, or distinguish the difference between a plaintiff and a defendant, or other, jurisdictions in courtrooms that probably is practical application as intellectual, and the same thing of something like someone even saying or repeating personal injury, sounding like they forfeited based upon a signature as some like defect, seeking amnesty, or some issue of like national security as a willingly forfeiture of some idea of like a defector seeking amnesty. National security issues like always, the idea of just turning, K television on. Oh God, like, do you have like a remote control with like a remote control power? I mean, you can just like turn on litigation, the fact that it's habeas corpus, and the intellectual consumption, feeding the mind, because I believe you can use your full potential. Use your full potential because I believe. Yeah, so the thing about constitutional law is like it seemed to be the thing about that, but in any case, so I just want to like make a real quick audio, and yeah, so I'm gonna take a break right there and stop on doing any little later. So there it is, yeah.